Mr. Vellayan Subbiah, the Managing Director and ED of Cholamandalam Finance, Investment and Finance, joins us. Mr. Subbiah, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. The finance numbers clearly look good, but what is not looking good is the increase in the bad loans. Can you take us through this NPL growth that you have shown? It's 2.6 from 1.4% year ago levels, your gross NPL. How does it compare on a quarter-on-quarter basis? Are you at least roughing out?
Yeah, actually, Ekta, thanks for the question. Obviously, NPAs is everybody's concern right now. What we have seen is an increase in NPA levels. Almost, I'd say, for the last 6 quarters have been kind of sequential increases in NPAs. Obviously, the challenge has been, kind of the overall condition of the economy that has affected our light commercial vehicles and actually been across our truck portfolio. So in terms of whether this is going to improve or not, obviously is dependent on the economy. What we are seeing is much more positive sentiment than before. We haven't seen real translation onto the ground yet. But I increasingly think, as we go on talking to the field, we're at the cusp of a turn. Perhaps November, December, sometimes in January is when it will begin to turn. The unfortunate bit with NPAs is that you have a bit of a lag effect around it because, as performance improves, even as our collections performance, we've seen roll forward rates decreasing across a couple of buckets. But it takes a while for that to translate into NPAs because when you're dealing with 6 quarters of declining NPAs, you're probably going to have a hangover from that for at least a couple of quarters before you see that number beginning to move south again. So,
when does it get lower? On a quarter-on-quarter basis, can you give us the aggregate number increase? And, I mean, is third quarter, the current quarter, likely to be the last one? Are you likely to see at least a decline in the aggregate NPLs?
So like I said, right, usually what happens with this is because the overall buckets have gotten so much larger, right? So the amount that's sitting at 150 to 180 days in delinquency that then rolls forward into an NPA bucket, those buckets themselves have gotten a lot larger than they were before. So when will we see a decline in NPAs? I'd like to think that it is about 2 quarters out.
Okay.
Mr. Subbiah, hi, good morning. The other bit is your margins have fallen across categories because your net interest income has jumped about 19%, but profit growth is only about 6% or so. And across categories, we've seen fall in NIMs. Would that trend be arrested going forward?
Yes, actually there is no real drop in NIMs. What you see in reported numbers are usually due to income reversal on accounts that go into NPA. Our NIMs have actually held fairly steady. So when you take interest plus fee margin, which is what we show as our net income margin, that number is held fairly steady both across vehicle finance and home equity. Any drop you see is only due to income reversals due to accounts going into NPA. But NIMs are continuing to hold and we don't see NIMs coming down at all.
Okay. So in terms of CV financing, how are things looking up? Have you seen any kind of recovery on ground and would you expect that to continue?
Yeah. So Anuj, it's a good question. What we're seeing on CVs, for example, right now is a couple of markets are beginning to pick up. One is the used CV market and the other is heavy commercial vehicles. Right now in heavy commercial vehicles is predominantly fleet buying. But that's a good sign because usually that's a lead indicator and usually after a certain level of fleet buying you're going to see the smaller buyers get into the market as well. And actually if you look at what happened with the overall cycle, heavy commercial went down first and then that was followed by lights and then by small commercial vehicles. But actually small commercial vehicles and then lights. So even on the uptake, it looks like that's going to take the same pattern. So we're going to see heavy commercial vehicles pick up first, and hopefully we'll see lights and small commercial vehicles pick up in fairly quick order after that as well.
You must be seeing the cost of funds falling for you at all? I mean, SBI has lowered even its base rate, lowered its deposit costs, and then of course wholesale rates have been falling. Is money getting any cheaper? I believe you're also looking to raise funds.
Yes, so Ekta, two things. One is we did just raise a lot of equity. We took in 500 crores in equity, actually in the form of CCPS, and that will convert into equity in a year. So we did that recently in September. And as far as debt is concerned, debt is getting cheaper, which is a good thing for all of us. We're seeing both NCDs and commercial paper dropping off a bit. So we're adjusting our mix in terms of bank borrowing versus what we take in terms of paper. So we are definitely seeing a reduction in the cost of funds, and that's helping us on the NIM front as well.
All right, Mr. Subbiah, thanks a lot for your time today. That's Cholamandalam Investment. The stock not doing too well in today's trade.